Time for tennis talk. Come in from the playground, boys and girls, and let's have a jolly round of tennis talk. I'll make some tea and crumpets, and we can just have some good old-fashioned tennis talk. Come now. My name is Aaron Knapp. Welcome to Tennis Talk Daily, and I want to start the show by addressing a very important question, a very serious question, a question that's been on the minds of so many people over the last couple of weeks, over the last couple of months, in fact. I mean, it's the question that has gripped the tennis world, and the question is, just how the heck do you pronounce this dude's name? So I posed the question a while back, a couple of videos back, and got some really good comments, but I think we were missing some key factors in terms of how to pronounce this dude's name. And so I did some research, and I think I now have a grasp on it. The problem is I need to kind of get into a different personality in a way to summon the skills to pronounce this. So bear with me here. I'm just going to do this. Okay, that's better. Now I think I can pronounce that dude's name, this dude's name, because listen, the Hulk can lift up cars. He can break down buildings, lift up trucks. You think he has a problem pronouncing a South Korean's name? No, that's easy for him. So here it goes. Hyunchang, Hyunchang. You got it? That's very simple. Really, the pronunciation per se is not the problem with that name, because remember, the South Koreans have their own alphabet. When they translate over to English, they use the English letters that are most appropriate to produce the pronunciation that most closely approximates the South Korean pronunciation. So the letters are not there to trick us. They're there to help us. And the pronunciation of it per se is pretty straightforward, Hyunchang. But here's the key part. It's the intonation, the tone of it. And this is something special about the Asian languages. It's the tone of it. So it's Hyunchang, Hyunchang. You got to come up at the end. And there's even a variation within chung. It's Yangchang, Yangchang. So it's kind of one word, but the tone of it rises in the end. So there you have it. The definitive way to pronounce this dude's name, Hyunchang. So you got it here. You got it at Tennis Talk Daily, the definitive pronunciation. Subscribe to the channel if for no other reason that I will give you the proper pronunciations. Give the video a thumbs up. We've got so much tennis talk coming up. And the Miami Open, of course, is beginning right now. We've got the first round beginning tomorrow. And it's going to be a great tournament. But listen, we are going to be giving you daily tennis talk. Every day, I'm going to give you a fix of tennis talk throughout the tournament and maybe beyond the tournament. And maybe we'll do it twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a day. I'm up for it if you want to party. If you want to do a tennis party, I'm here for you. So I'm going to be giving the tennis talk on a daily basis, and I really am excited about it. We've got a great tournament coming up. We could see a rematch between Federer and Del Potro, and Federer may have an opportunity to redeem himself, and he will redeem himself. So I want to talk today about 2 issues. One is the Miami draw, and I'm going to talk about that second, in fact, so we can kind of understand a little bit about the particular matchups that we might see. The first issue I wanted to kind of revisit is an issue that I raised in my last video about what kind of explains Federer's different state in the last 2 matches of the Indian Wells tournament. I think he was different in those last 2 matches, I thought. He was just a different player. He was just a little bit out of sorts, more so in the Coric match, but to some degree in the Del Potro match. And there have been some good comments in this respect, and there is also the theory going around that the slow courts at Indian Wells were part of the problem and are part of what explain why Federer was sort of out of sorts. Well, I think that that's actually a problematic theory. Of course, we've had that notion in mind for a while. We've known that the courts out at Indian Wells are notoriously slow. We've been discussing that for a couple of weeks. So we knew very well going into this about the court conditions out there. And we knew that Roger Federer has won at Indian Wells, won the trophy at Indian Wells 5 times, including last year. So it strikes me that if the slow courts were a problem, then, we'd have some issues in previous years with Federer, but he's really done a bang-up job at this tournament. You do have the faster air with the dry air as well, so that could have been something that benefited Federer, in fact, particularly with the net play. But I think that this theory is problematic. You do have one player that's come out and said that the courts at Indian Wells might have been slower this year than in previous years, and that player was Caroline Wozniacki, which is the incorrect pronunciation. And I did some research on this one too. And I've got the correct pronunciation of Caroline Wozniacki, whose name is mispronounced all over the place by everyone virtually, and she doesn't correct it. But she has stated for the record how her last name is supposed to be pronounced in the Polish, and this is what it is. Caroline Wozniacka. That's it. Caroline Wozniacka. And it has that kind of tone of disgust at the end. Wozniacka. Disgusting Wozniacka. Which is not really consistent with her personality. She seems like a really nice woman. But that is, for the record, how to pronounce her name. And Caroline Wozniacka has stated or suggested that the courts were even slower this year than in previous years. Of course, that was after a loss of hers, I'm pretty sure, and I'm not sure she can be trusted. I don't think there was an outcry from the players about this. And moreover, again, those courts have been slow for years. They were slow before 2001, and they were slow after 2001. They've been slow the whole time. Roger's known that. Roger's performed very well on these courts before. It's difficult for me to believe that that's what explains Roger's sort of out-of-sorts state in those last 2 matches. The other possible explanation is the opponents. Maybe, Coric and Del Potro just kind of raised the level of the game against Roger, and that Roger was struggling because the 2 opponents were harder than the opponents that he played earlier in the tournament. And I don't think that's a great explanation either, because I think that there was some high level of play from the other players, particularly Chung. And remember, Roger just kind of steamrolled over Chung in that second set. No, something happened in those last 2 matches, and I think it's something deeper. And I think part of it is, like I said yesterday, at least in the final moments in that tiebreaker, Del Potro wanted it more than Federer did. Just a little bit. Federer still wanted it, but I think Del Potro just had he had zeroed in on it a little better, and he just wanted it a little bit more than Federer did, and he was rewarded for it in the end. That's part of it. But let's also talk about the pressure that's on Federer. At all times, really, the pressure, the burden of a champion is so much greater than the burden on the other players, just in terms of the physicality of it, too. Think about this. Novak Djokovic and so many other players who strike out in the early rounds, well, they're going to be much better rested coming into Miami, aren't they? Federer, the champion, who's always getting to the finals virtually, he has to fight to the last. It's much more exhausting for him to fight through to the final rounds than it is for the players that, again, sort of strike out in the earlier rounds. They get time to rest up. So, Djokovic, for example, is going to have a lot more rest. Zverev, a lot more rest. Some of those other players, a lot more rest than Federer has. He's the champion. There's a great burden, but there's also so much pressure on him. The pressure he had coming in this tournament to maintain the number 1, for example. That was an immense amount of pressure. The pressure he had to win that match against Coric and make this his most winning season in his career, that was a huge amount of pressure. Of course, the burden and the pressure of defending his title was a huge amount of pressure. And then there is the burden of the crowd support. People talk about People complain about the crowd support for Federer. Oh, they were so mean to Coric, or they were so mean to Del Potro, or Federer is given an advantage by the crowd support. Well, the first response to this is that Federer has earned the crowd support. He really has earned, he's paid his dues and earned the crowd support over the years. But the other point is that crowd support is an immense burden for him, because the pressure is just huge. Everybody's expecting him to win. Everybody wants him to win. It makes the burden even greater for him than it is for players that the crowds don't support. They can just kind of play freely. They don't have that extra situational pressure. Roger has it all the time. The crowds want him. He's got so much pressure to perform. And I think ultimately, perhaps Roger just couldn't take it in this one instance, and he just couldn't deal with the pressure. And one possible response to pressure, and I know in my personal experience, is sort of anger and frustration. And I think that's part of what happened with Roger. I think he just had so much pressure, and then he performed. He was actually maintaining his #1. He got the most winning season of his career. He was about to defend the title. He was in the final. But then in the final matches, I think, the pressure just got to him. And he was like, you know what? I don't want this pressure. I didn't ask for it. I just want to come out here and play tennis. Maybe that was part of it. And one response, again, is sort of anger. And that could explain why Roger got angry on the court, or a little uncharacteristically peeved on the court. Comment below, because we had a little discussion about this in the last video. Do you think this is a good sign that Roger is starting to have disputes with the umpire, that he is getting upset on the court? There's this saying that the grumpy old goat is a good thing, that the grumpy old goat, and I've said myself, it's even good when he gets grumpy, and to an extent that's true, but I do think it can go too far. I think it might have hurt him this time. He said he was trying to get himself psyched up possibly, but I think it's telling that he has to resort to these little petty disputes and getting into vocal exchanges that involve kind of anger and frustration with the umpire. I think it's a little weird that he would use that, and it's telling that he had to resort to that in order to psych himself up. I don't think it quite worked. So a combination of just not being able to muster up the motivation, but also all that pressure. Maybe he just couldn't take it. He just couldn't take the pressure for once in that situation. He will be able to deal with the pressure going forward, I promise you. It's part of what his experience enables him to do so consistently. But this one time, I think it was just too much for him. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. So, the Miami draw. Let's talk a little bit about the Miami draw. The Miami draw looks fairly clean for Federer. We could see possibly in the 4th round, a Federer versus Mannarino, or a Federer versus Carreño Busta. We could also, further down in that quarter, we could see a 4th round between Berdych and Anderson, which could be interesting. Remember, Nick Kyrgios is back in play, back in Miami, so he's going to be a next-gen guy that we're going to watch very closely. He could be in the 4th round with someone like Alex Zverev or Fabio Fognini, where the G is not pronounced. Further on down the draw, you do have Coric, and we can do a little pronunciation of Coric here, which is interesting. The first name is very important with Coric because it's Borna. It's not Borna, it's Borna. Borna Coric. And he could have a 4th round match, say, with Sam Querrey, but he's going to need to get through Leonardo Mayer, and he might need to get through Jack Sock. It's probably going to be Leonardo Mayer, both of whom are playing pretty well. Coric has a pretty hard run, in fact, to the 4th round. In the bottom half of the draw, you do have Delpo and Djokovic. You could see a Delpo versus Djokovic 4th round match, which could be really interesting. In another one of the slots in that quarter of the lower half, you could see a Raonic versus Gasquet in the 4th round, possibly. You could also see further down a Chung versus Goffin in the 4th round. You could see an Isner versus Cilic at the bottom of the draw in the 4th round. So that's just kind of a glimpse of what we could see in the 4th round. Of course, we could very well get a rematch between Federer and Delpo on these faster courts. And maybe that will test out the theory about the slower courts over at IW as against Delpo in particular. So that will be interesting to see. If Delpo can sustain this, he probably will be in the final. In terms of a semifinal for Federer, again, we might see a rematch with Coric, I'm pretty sure. So if Coric gets through Borna Coric, we could see a semifinal rematch between Federer and Coric. We'll just have to kind of see. Again, Coric has a pretty tough draw getting out even to the fourth round. He's got to get through. Leonardo Meyer and Jack Sock, and those could be some tough matches, assuming that Meyer and Sock don't strike out first. So that's just a quick glimpse of the Miami Open. It's going to be a great tournament, whatever happens. Federer will be performing. He is going to get the rest that he needs. Djokovic will have a little more rest, and all eyes will be on a possible Delpo-Djokovic fourth-round match in Miami this year. So that's what I have for you today. Again, we're doing daily tennis talk every day. Tune in, subscribe. We've got the daily talk. And I want to go out with a song that I would like to ask you if you can guess what this song is. Uh-oh. I think I might have just showed you. Well, give a comment. It does have something to do with the Miami Open. Subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing tennis talk all week on a daily basis, and we got some great tennis coming up. Can't wait to see you again. Talk soon. Bye.